Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Igniting Leadership Excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Hi, thanks for tuning in.
Everybody, today's topic is going to be organizational culture and esprit de corps. But before we get into this, a couple things that Emily and I want to mention is, first of all, as a reminder, if you've not listened to this, or it wouldn't be a reminder if you've not listened to it, but this is not just for firefighters. You do not have to be a firefighter to listen to our podcast, because the topics that we cover, they reach a wide variety of people and a wide audience, such as the one today, organizational culture and esprit de corps. And we're going to get into that here in a few minutes. But Emily and I want to point out a fact is that statistically, most podcasts that are started never ever survive past 6 months. Well, we've gone past 6 months and we are already into our 7th, maybe even our 8th month here. And we're going to continue doing this. Emily and I have no intention of stopping. And we appreciate those who are listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, on my YouTube channel under Fire Officer Leadership Academy, we appreciate it. Also, since it's been February when we started this thing, Emily and I today, it is crazy. Emily and I today, we just want to give you a little bit of background in case you are new to the podcast. I invested 37 years of my life as a firefighter. I did start out in a volunteer fire department in New Jersey, where I grew up, hence Jersey Rick. And then I was a firefighter in the Air Force and in the Marine Corps. And then when I separated from the Marine Corps, moved to Loveland, Colorado, got married. My wife and I, this September, it'll be 37 years that we've been married. We have 2 daughters, one of them, Emily, my co-host, and our other one, Rebecca, who's married to Nick, who's a career Air Force man. And after moving to Loveland, shortly after that, I became part of the Loveland Fire Rescue Authority, where I spent nearly 30 years here, retired out as a battalion chief. During my career here in Loveland, I had the fantastic opportunity to lead the hazardous materials team, the wildland firefighting program, special operations team. Last 15 years in the department, I was a battalion chief and also served a period of time as the department's training chief. I've been around the fire service an awful long time. First riding a fire engine when I was 3 years old. And now my business is Fire Officer Leadership Academy, where I'm providing career and leadership, decision-making, teaching, coaching, and mentoring to firefighters. And also there's other people who have reached out to me as well that are not firefighters. Emily, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your background as well?
Yeah, well, I grew up pretty much in the fire department. So the fire department is very near and dear to my heart. I just love that entire industry. Our police officers, firemen, and the military. So that's just very special to me. But yeah, a little bit about myself is I've had a career in HR as well as marketing. And now I run my own baking business where we make cake pops. So, and then in addition to being the co-host of this podcast.
Yeah, and Emily does a fantastic job with her graphic design and her marketing. And our logo is a compilation. There's a gentleman here in Loveland, Colorado on the fire department, Matt Hinsman. Matt and I worked together for a number of years. He's the one that drew up the little fire truck on the logo. That's the first one that I wrote. And he also drew up the outline for the state of New Jersey. And then Emily took over and she completed the rest. And so she's fantastic with graphic design.
Thank you.
So with that being said, today's topic is organizational culture and esprit de corps. So we're going to look at how these two are linked together.
So before we explore how the two are tied together, let's investigate each one.
That sounds like a good idea. So that way we can explain it to our listeners.
Yes. So let's start with organizational culture.
Okay.
Let's define it by achievers.com defines it as the set of values, beliefs, attitudes, systems, and rules that outline and influence employee behavior within an organization. The culture reflects how employees, customers, vendors, and stakeholders experience the organization and its brand.
Yeah, that's a good definition of organizational culture. We're going to take a look at another one here from a gentleman by the name of Edgar Schein. every organization has got a culture, and
Mhm.
it's there. Some people might, well, we don't have a culture. Well, I'd say baloney to that. Every
Yeah.
organization has got a culture. And sometimes I'll narrow this down. The fire departments is there could be a culture in each station and on each shift. And our department here in Loveland experienced that at one time until we became much more unified in our mission and goals and where we were headed. But there are so many fire departments out there that, let's just pick an easy number. They got 10 stations. Let's say it's a paid fire department. They have 10 stations. There's 3 shifts, and the department has an overall culture. Each of those stations could have an overall culture, and within each station, each shift could have an overall culture, which
Mm.
actually leads to a lot of disunity. And so they do. I don't care if you're working down, at the older repair garage turning wrenches and you're taking engines out of cars, there's a culture that exists there. If you're on a church staff, there's a culture that
Yeah.
exists there. Hey, I spent time in 2 branches of the military, the Air Force and the Marine Corps, and there are very opposite cultures in those 2 branches of the service. But let's get back here to what Edgar Schein. Edgar Schein was known for his work on organizational culture. He defined 3 levels of culture. The first one is assumptions and beliefs. That assumptions
Ooh.
and beliefs, that's those unconscious beliefs, perceptions, thoughts, feelings that really boils down to the unwritten rules of the organization. And I've seen it throughout my career in the fire service. I've heard other firefighters from other areas say that when somebody graduated from the recruit academy and they got out on the shift, they would be told by their company officer, okay, that was the academy. Now let's tell you how it really works.
Mm.
Well, there's yeah, it is different from the academy life to shift life. But when we're saying, let's tell you how it really works, it's like, okay, what's the underlying cause of that statement right there? Is that company officer now about ready to reveal how life on shift is? Or is that company officer one that's going to destroy and tear down what was taught in the academy? Also, part of assumptions and beliefs of how decisions are made, conflict resolution, internal behaviors. This is something I've been big on years going by now, and that is the fact, and let's go back to the fire service, is that Joe Schmuckatelli graduates from a 4-month recruit academy, shows up on the fire station on his first day, checks in, and he talks to the captain or the lieutenant, and that officer says, okay, you're going to ride backwards or you're going to shut up, and I'm going to tell you what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I'm going to tell you what to think, when to think, and how to think. I'm going to tell you when to speak, how to speak, and when to speak. Okay, that's a bad culture. That's a bad culture.
Yeah.
That's one automatically that is shutting down, the new
Mhm.
person. So and you know what, you don't have to be in a fire department to be like that either. That crosses over a number of different lines of professions. One of the other areas that Edgar Schein talked about is espoused values, strategies, goals, mission, visions, and values. And how are those communicated within and without? And I like that word espoused values, because an organization, you could go to their website and they've got their mission, vision, and values that are up there on their website.
Yeah.
You could go into their workplace and there's the nice plaques and all this stuff. But what are they actually doing?
Yeah. Is it just written or are they putting that written word into action?
That's exactly right. Are they engaging in what they have on the wall, or is it
Yeah.
only come out when it's politically expedient, to say, well, this is our
Yeah.
vision and values? That's, Emily, that's why when I talk
Yeah.
to people and they're seeking a career in the fire service, I always counsel them as the number one, do you know what your core values are? And
Mm.
if they don't, I work with them to determine what their core values are, because my next thing is, does the organizational core values line up with yours? Just
Yeah.
do not go out and start looking for a job because you need a job or just because it sounds good. Is really dig in and investigate. Do these core values match up and do they align with you?
That's a really good point because then you'll be a lot more, I don't know, happier and you can agree with their
Mhm.
values if that is your true values going in.
Right. Absolutely. And for those of you who may never have heard about what core values are, those are your deep down seated internal beliefs. Those things that you hold on to and that you are not going to compromise, regardless of what the consequences are. Even meaning that you may wind up with a target on your backside. You're not
Mhm.
going to compromise those values.
Could we give an example? Like, what would be your top 2 or 3 values?
Yes, I like to narrow it down to the top three values. I just worked with a gentleman the other day, and he came up with five, and that's
That's
fine,
a lot.
And and out of the five, I did say, okay, well, which are your top three? And he wasn't willing to go. I said, you're not giving these things up. I'm just saying we're just narrowing it down to your top three.
Yeah.
But for me, my top three core values are integrity, duty, and authenticity.
Mm.
And then underlying or over all that is my service to Christ and the family.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So the last thing that Shine talked about too is artifacts. That's those things that are visible structures, business processes, dress codes, work hours. For those of us in public safety, it's badges, patches, other uniform items, what's on the side of our trucks. Each individual fire station may have a different patch. For police officers, it's badges and patches, and certainly in the military, it's a uniform, how you wear the uniform. In the Marine Corps, we could identify every piece of the uniform from a historical perspective. What did this mean? It had a tie back. Those are organizational artifacts that tie into the culture of wherever it is that you're working.
Yeah. Just like I had a lanyard at my jobs.
Right.
But it got me into the places too.
Right. Absolutely.
Like
That's an artifact because it identified you as an employee working in human resources.
Yep. Yeah. So let's talk about next. What is Esprit decor?
Esprit decor. Yes, I know. Sometimes that could be a hard word.
Yes.
To say Esprit decor.
I've even practiced it, but
now, in the Marine Corps, Esprit decor is a big thing. It's talked about, quite a bit. What does it mean? Loyalty to, pride in, and enthusiasm for a unit shown by its members. Esprit de corps is the personality of a unit, and it makes up the unit's spirit. It's that comradeship amongst the members. It's an indicator of morale. Usually, when there's esprit de corps, my experience is there's a high morale that is in existence. There's a confidence and a trust that exists amongst the members. I trust you, you trust me. I don't have to question your ability to perform when the going gets tough. That's an indication of high esprit de corps. There's a heartfelt love and loyalty to the members within the organization. There might be one or two meatheads that are running around, but usually they're the outliers, and they stick out like a sore thumb. There's pride, but not an arrogance. There's unit pride. Yeah. I worked for Loveland Fire Rescue. There was a pride. I was in the Marine Corps. I was in the Air Force. I started out at Cedarville Fire Company in Cumberland County, New Jersey. There's a pride there. Now, people know when you're arrogant, they start walking around, strutting around, their noses stuck up in the air. And that really comes down to how do people carry themselves and how are they representing the organization. Look at how they're wearing a uniform. That comes down to police, fire, EMS, and the military. You look at somebody that's wearing a uniform and they look like a slob, I'm telling you what, they don't have any unit pride. They have no pride in their organization. They have no pride in themselves.
They don't really care.
They don't really care. One of the things I love seeing pictures of is the back end of a fire engine, the working end of the fire engine where the hose comes off. And you can tell a lot about a fire department. If that hose is loaded in sloppily, they don't care. But when that hose is loaded in and it looks uniform on the backside, that's telling me they have pride in their equipment. I'll specifically mention the Los Angeles Fire Department. I've had the opportunity to be out in California a number of times, and I've seen the condition of the apparatus in the LAFD. And I'm convinced somewhere along the line there must have been a Marine or a bunch of Marines in that organization, because I mean the equipment is immaculate. And we're talking about a large city fire department that has a lot of action and a lot of calls, but they keep the equipment looking nice and in good working order. So that's our little bit about Esprit decor. Now, what do we got here next on our topic list, Emily?
Well, so we dove into the definitions of it, but let's link between organizational culture and esprit de corps.
So looking at those definitions between organizational culture and esprit de corps, I believe that esprit de corps is a byproduct of a healthy organizational culture. Notice that I said healthy, healthy and thriving organizational culture. You look at an organization that shuts down people, bullies people, puts down people, and the list goes on and on and on. And that bad organizational culture is not going to create esprit de corps. What that poor organizational culture is going to create is a lot of hate and discontent and backstabbing. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So organizations with an outstanding culture are going to experience esprit de corps. It's basically what you're saying.
Yes. And in his book, Turn the Ship Around, retired Navy Captain L. David Marquette said, quote, "There was greater commitment, greater engagement," unquote. Now, this is a great book that he wrote, and he assumed command of one of actually it was titled The Worst Submarine in the United States Navy. It had low morale, poor culture within the sub. They had a very low reenlistment rate, which means a low retention rate. So the skipper came in, Captain Marquette came in, and over a really brief period of time, he turned around the culture on that submarine to where it became the best performing submarine in the Pacific Fleet, and I believe the entire Navy as well, and their retention rate went up. Wow. So what that points to is whether there's a good organizational culture or a bad organizational culture, who's it go back to?
The leader.
The leader. Absolutely. It's the leader. Yeah. And so you look at organizations that have poor leaders, they got poor culture. And statistically, folks, it's still brought out that people aren't leaving because of money. Not generally, they're not leaving because of money. They're leaving because of the leadership and the culture.
Yeah.
And there's some lousy cultures, and there's some very, very good cultures as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about an organization with a poor culture, and then I'll show you an organization that has no esprit de corps.
Yes, and that's a little bit of what we were talking about. And in my book, The Furnace of Leadership Development, in one of the chapters there, I'm talking about teamwork, I refer to 3D. D is in Delta, 3D people. They're disgruntled, they're dissatisfied, and they're disenchanted. There's a lack of trust that exists between the people. They're stabbing each other in the back. There's a lot of rumoring that's taking place, and people want to leave. And, I don't want to work in a place like that. And I have in the past. I was attached to a unit in the military that was, exactly like that. I mean, it was terrible, and I couldn't wait to get out of it. And once I had transferred to another unit, I found out that there was an investigation that was launched to dig into what was actually taking place in that unit. Why was the leadership so bad? Yesterday we found out that a commanding officer in the Air Force in a unit down in Eglin Air Force Base in Florida was relieved of command.
Yeah.
And there was not a lot of detail, but it sounded like the typical, military method of saying, well, there was a lack of trust and failure to lead people, so forth and so on like that. But I guarantee you, folks, I've been around long enough between working civilian jobs in Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the fire service to know that when there's a problem, it's at the top, and when things are going good, it starts at the top. It
Yeah,
is leadership, and it is always leadership.
absolutely. So the questions we want to ask our listeners and viewers is ask yourself this: what about your organization
Mhm.
culture? Does your organization lack esprit decor? If so, what is the underlying cause?
Absolutely. And folks, listen, if you're missing these questions that we're asking here, stop it and go back
Yeah.
now and ask yourself these things. Now, also, what action steps can you take to make the change? You say, well, hey, Rick and Emily, I am low down in the food chain, and I talked about this one in a previous episode, is like, well, that's above my pay grade. You know, yeah, what are things that you can do too? You
Mhm.
know, and as much as that could be frustrating, you may have to make a decision. Do I want to stay in this organization, or is it time for me to leave so I don't become one of those 3D people? That could be a tough one. Also, uh, is there low morale amongst the troops? And if so, what is causing it? Is it you? Yeah. Are you naturally a negative individual? There's a lot of people out there that are like that.
Yeah.
What else is on our list there, Emily?
So, in contrast, is your organizational culture healthy, vibrant, and thriving, and ones that others envy?
Yeah, and how's that tie in there?
Mhm.
Is there esprit de corps
Yeah.
amongst the members and employees? You're listening to this, if you have a culture in your organization that is healthy, vibrant, and thriving,
Oh,
one
yeah.
that others want to come work for. And there's a lot of places that are out there. It's like, man, I want to work there.
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
like to just quickly add in when I worked in human resources, yeah, we definitely had our problems and issues, but for the most part, it really was like a family.
Mhm.
And we even took time and had like gatherings and potlucks, like even in the middle of the filing cabinets. But we really cultivated that. And so when my job didn't get approved like with the budget, it was a really hard thing to leave because it felt like you were leaving a family. And I think that's really important in like a cultivating a culture in an organization.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And ask, is there a high level of morale amongst the employees, amongst the people you're working with? And then again, what action steps can you take to ensure this type of culture does not fade away? If you're the boss, if you're the supervisor, you're in that leadership position, that's falling on you. And so many times, military, fire, and I believe police probably the same, is you could step into something and it's completely totally different than the civilian world, meaning
Yeah.
that, hey, and anything that's government related, it's hard to can somebody's rear end. It is. it,
Yes.
it, it really is, and that's a reputation that government service has. It's very difficult to
Yeah.
can somebody, but we step into leadership positions. And I'll use myself as a battalion chief. I got promoted. I stepped into the role as a battalion chief, and the morale on a shift that I was on, and I had stayed on the same shift. It wasn't bad, but I felt it could be better. A couple of years later, I was transferred to another shift where they had been calling themselves the Island of Misfits.
Mm.
And my very first shift, I said, that's it. you know I do not lead misfits. I do not command misfits. And so that type of language, it stops right here, right now, because that was a bad, toxic culture. And it came back on to me as the battalion chief, as the shift commander, to correct that and stop that
Mm.
from going on.
Wow. So let's recap this episode we've been talking about. We've been talking about the link between organizational culture and esprit de corps. Edgar Schein identified 3 levels of organizational culture. That is assumption and beliefs, the espoused values, and the artifacts. And just to recap on what the artifacts are, that's if you're in the fire, police, military, that's your uniform, badges, that type of thing. Artifacts, if you're in more of like an different organization, like your lanyard, employee ID.
Hey, and also I was thinking back as you're mentioning that, my good friend Rick, who, although he spent a good number of years as an insurance agent, and he's my best friend. I've known Rick since 1981. And when I got to know Rick, he was a heavy duty mechanic at a large auto dealership in Denver. And I'd go over there sometimes, and they had their artifacts. Yep,
Yeah.
mechanics, they have their artifacts. Hey, their toolbox is one.
Yeah.
They all
Kind of
own their,
important.
yeah, they all own their own toolbox, and that's their artifacts. And the Snap-on tool guy, showed up periodically. Well, the mechanics that worked on the fire apparatus here in Loveland, they have their artifacts. And part of those things too are awards that they have up on the walls. So finishing up too, as a reminder that Esprit de Corps is that loyalty to, pride in, and enthusiasm for a unit shown by its members. Esprit de Corps is the personality of a unit, and it makes up the unit's spirit. So Emily, as we're wrapping this up, is there anything else that you'd like to add on this topic?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, listen, everybody, if you found this episode to be useful, please like and subscribe and share. Hey, subscribing lets you know that, hey, the next episode is available. Also, visit my website, www.fireofficerleadershipacademy.com. The link is in the show notes. You can learn more about the services that I have to offer, which are individual, small group coaching, and I do mentoring and then teaching and speaking as well. On my website, you have access to my weekly leadership blog, which on the website, it's released on Monday mornings, and I post it on LinkedIn on Wednesday mornings as well. So thank you for tuning in and listening. And until next time, we'll say goodbye to
Bye-bye.
everybody.